Hello, this is Cheryl Petersen at healingsciencetoday.com. I'll spend a few minutes here. I'm just going to talk about the rules of Christian Science. My parents introduced me to Christian Science after I was born. They took me to the Christian Science Sunday School weekly. I learned that in the late 19th and early 20th century, Mary Baker Eddy investigated the phenomena of spiritual healing and discovered it was, and always had been, active and alive. To further investigate, Eddy called the activity Christian Science and broke it down into manageable ideas and rules and practices. Eddy wrote Science and Health with the Key to the Scriptures to give Christian Science a voice and form. Eddy also started a church, which I attended. But she'd been dead for more than half a century by the time I was 12 years old, and so it was my grandma who asked me if I would like to join the First Church of Christ Scientist in Boston, Massachusetts. Sure, why not, I thought, and I signed the paperwork. I was naive, no doubt about it. Did Grandma take advantage of my youth? No, I am sure Grandma's intent was wanting the best for me. I do, however, remember Grandma giving me a copy of the church manual. She read something from the book, but I don't really remember what it was. And she didn't teach me, or I at least didn't learn, if any of the bylaws or rules in the manual were either important or unimportant. I was in my 20s before the church manual became a thing. All I will say now is, from that point on in my 20s until I was in my 40s, I actually believed that rules in the church manual were part of or foundational to the rules of Christian Science. I was naive. But Bible reading helped me grow up, so to speak. More than once I went through growth spurts when reading verses like the one from Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew that I want to read, but I want to read from two different versions, more versions I read from, the clearer I can understand the meaning. So this is the verse from Matthew from the New International Version. It was when Jesus told the religious leaders, "You hypocrites, Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human rules." I'll read it from The Message by Cheryl Petersen. Jesus says, "Frauds, Isaiah's prophecy of you hit the bull's eye. These people make a big show of saying the right thing, but their heart isn't in it. They act like they're worshiping me, but they don't mean it. They just use me as a cover for teaching whatever suits their fancy." Wow, I thought. Jesus grabbed human rules, doctrines, and whatever suits my fancy out of the picture of God and gave them all a big shake. So, what kind of rules did Jesus obey? I asked myself. Only because of my upbringing, I answer that question with, the rules of Christ, the science of Christ. Jesus applied the Christ rules of justice, mercy, faith in divine spirit, courage, forgiveness, honesty, trustworthiness, loving his enemies, along with the rule of spiritual healing. This is not to poo-poo human rules, which are helpful in religious and secular existences. But human rules need to be, and generally are, treated as adaptable, amenable to higher and better ideas of justice, mercy, and so on as spiritual ideas continue to unfold. Mary Baker Eddy herself constantly amended or revised the church manual from necessity, the logic of events, and the immediate demand to maintain the dignity of the reason for the religious institution in the first place. In other words, in my 40s, I personally started treating bylaws and rules in the church manual how I wanted to be treated. I am not perfect, and I want to be treated as though I can change for the better. Even if I lose something I adore or cherish along the way. I may be naive, but when demonstrating that human rules are amenable or obedient to divine rules, I find the benefits to outweigh the losses. This brings me back to Science and Health to discuss divine rules within the activity of Christian Science. I'm going to do this by reading from two versions of Science and Health. This is, I use a parallel, but I know it's really fat. And there is just the 7th edition of 21st Century Science and Health, but in this one it has both Mary Baker-Eddy's last edition of Science and Health plus the 7th edition of 21st Century Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, a modern version of Mary Baker-Eddy's Science and Health by Cheryl Petersen. It's read side by side. Okay, rules of Christian Science. Oh, this is not a complete or final list of anything. Nothing that becomes materialized or is tangible to our physical senses is complete or final. Here we go. Eddy wrote, "Science shows appearances often to be erroneous and corrects these errors by the simple rule that the greater controls the lesser." From 21st Century Science and Health. "Science shows that appearances are often mistaken, leading to false judgments and conclusions. To correct the mistakes, we follow the simple rule that the greater controls the lesser. For example, the infinite controls the finite." Second rule. Eddy wrote, "Self-abnegation, by which we lay down all for truth or Christ, in our warfare against error, is a rule in Christian Science." From 21st Century Science and Health. "A rule in science is to fight against error and negate personal finite reasoning with infinite truth." Eddy wrote, "Strict adherence to the divine principle and rules of the scientific method has secured the only success of the students of Christian Science." From 21st Century Science and Health. It actually reads the same, so I won't repeat it. But the scientific method basically is question, hypothesize, test, analyze evidence, conclude, rinse, wash, and repeat. But doing so mentally, spiritually, metaphysically, within the framework of divine principle rather than within physical principles. Okay, the fourth rule. Mary Baker-Eddy wrote, "Subject sickness, sin, and death to the rule of health and holiness in Christian Science." From 21st Century Science and Health. "Expose disorder and impurity to the rule of health and holiness in divine science, and you will become aware of the truth of spiritual science, for it heals the sick and sinning as no other system can." Wow, that was wordy. Don't let me forget to revise that sentence better for the 8th edition of 21st Century Science and Health. Okay, fifth rule. Eddy wrote, "Truth is affirmative and confers harmony. All metaphysical logic is inspired by this simple rule of truth, which governs all reality. By the truthful arguments you employ, and especially by the spirit of truth and love which you entertain, you will heal the sick." From 21st Century Science and Health. "Truth is affirmative and confers harmony. All metaphysical logic is inspired by this simple rule of truth, which governs all reality. By the truthful reasoning you employ, and especially by the spirit of truth and love which you entertain, you will heal the sick. A sixth rule. Mrs. Eddy wrote, "The devotion of thought to an honest achievement makes the achievement possible. Exceptions only confirm this rule, proving that failure is occasioned by a too feeble faith." From 21st Century Science and Health. The commitment of thought to an honest achievement makes the achievement possible. Exceptions only confirm this rule, proving that failure is occasioned by a strong faith in failure. I could go on, but these spiritual rules are doable, active, anytime, anywhere, for anyone. Let's end this video by restating a few rules of Christian Science in quick bites. Work for the greater good and still take care of yourself. Accept and act on the rules of perpetual harmony, health, and holiness. Treat reality scientifically and spiritually. Employ truthful arguments. Entertain the spirit of truth and love. P.S. For those of you who don't know, I recently released Science and Spirituality, celebrating the 150th anniversary of the first edition of Mary Baker Eddy's Science and Health. I posted in here, right in the front, a list of worldwide religions and philosophies, all of which have statements identifying with what is usually called the Golden Rule, a divine rule, treating others the way we want to be treated. We belong to God, an act of God raising us up, clearing the way, righting wrongs, healing hurts, and hugging us all.